Hey guys. So there's this movie that a few of you in the comments recommended I check out because it seems to predict the Charlie Kirk assassination. And it's honestly kind of insane and scary. This movie's from 1998. It's called Snake Eyes with Nicolas Cage. Now let me just start out by saying that I'm not implying anything. I'm literally just going to break down the movie and point out a few connections. But I want to make it clear that I think it's still too soon to come to any conclusions. That said, I find it beyond bizarre that this movie's basically about a politician named Charles Kirkland who gets assassinated during a live event, he gets shot in the neck, and it looks shockingly similar. It occurs during a boxing match and the boxer's named Lincoln Tyler, who in the movie keeps out Cowans and eavesdroppers, meaning he's a Masonic guard or executioner. He's the Atlantic City executioner. Oh, and the fight and assassination just happens to be on September 10th, the same exact day. Now look, there are some crazy implications if this really is predictive programming or a planned event. I'm not necessarily saying that's the case. I'm open to the idea of a cosmic joker, or even the idea of magic and mimetic entities where this movie in a sense is programmed reality to manifest it, hinting towards a simulated reality. Or honestly, I would even say the Mandela effect because I've literally never heard of this movie, but it doesn't really matter. I'm just going to break down the movie and you can come to your own conclusions. This movie to me fits into the category of 90s truth bomb movies that have a slight political motive or undertone, whether that's to disclose something or to program the masses for what's coming. Kind of like Enemy of the State, for example, but Snake Eyes isn't so in your face and it's not necessarily directed at a conspiracy audience. The film opens with a newscaster hyping the live Powell pay-per-view event. On the billboard you see it says Atlantic City Executioner, Tyler vs. Ruiz, September 10th. Now I did want to say that I'm not completely sure if this is September 10th. That's what everyone else is saying, but I'm not exactly sure if that's a 10. I mean, that's what's going viral right now and everybody seems to think that it says September 10th. But in the film there's only one hint to what the date is, and it's this beginning scene with the billboard above the three visible pillars. And no matter what, it is clear that this takes place at 10 p.m., so it would still have the same symbolism. She also says this is the final event to be held in this storied hall before it gets renovated into the Millennium Hotel and Casino. And all of this is happening during Hurricane Jezebel, yet 14,000 people still decided to come watch the fight. Nicolas Cage plays Rick Santoro, this cocky, corrupt cop who's mostly there to gamble on the fight. So the first 5 minutes is just Rick being Rick, running around the casino trying to put money on the fight. When he gets down by the ring, he links up with his old buddy, Commander Kevin Dunn. This military guy who's basically in charge of security for the Secretary of Defense, Charles Kirkland. The secretary shows up at the fight because he wants the publicity of being seen at a big event. Mr. Gilbert Powell's here, but the movie quickly moves on as it doesn't seem to want to talk about this guy that much directly, but he is a huge character in the background of this entire story. After catching up, they sit down to watch the fight when Dunn gets distracted by a red-haired woman in a red dress. He eventually gets up and follows her out. About a minute later, a woman in a blonde wig and white outfit sits down next to Rick and tries to talk to the Secretary of Defense. The fight continues and a man in the crowd starts yelling, "Here comes the pain," right as Lincoln Tyler gets knocked out and hits the floor. Rick gets a phone call from someone telling him to look for his lucky number, and then all of a sudden, shots go off. The secretary gets shot in the neck, and like I said earlier, it looks shockingly similar to what really happened. I'm not going to describe it more than that, but another weird detail is that Nick Cage kind of touches his ear like the bullet grazed him, but I don't think that's what happened. I think it's just blood splatter. Still, it feels like a strange little reference there. Chaos breaks out, and the woman in the wig is also shot. They both hit the floor and take cover, while up at the top of the stadium, a security guard fires on the assassin. Meanwhile, Tyler the fighter is supposed to be knocked out, but he's looking around because he hears the shots, and Rick notices this. The crowd starts trying to get out, including the woman in the wig, now revealed to have dark hair, who's trying to slip away. Dunn shows back up and Rick tells him the woman next to the secretary threatened him, got shot, and then tried to run. Rick starts taking control and he shuts down the arena, and we see beneath all this cocky corruption, he's actually a sharp undercover cop. And the movie starts mentioning tunnels. They come up multiple times throughout the story. The secretary's body is wheeled out through these backhall tunnels as they try to rush him to the hospital. Dunn is freaking out, blaming himself because he was supposed to be standing in front of the secretary, but got distracted by that red-haired woman, so he wasn't there to protect him. Now he's scared he's going to be court-martialed, but Rick tells him to relax, cover the story, and just say that he was investigating a suspicious character. Dunn says that he can't lie, and Rick says, look, it's not lying, just tell them what you did right. Basically, cover this up or it's the end of your career. He killed the assassin. He saved the day. Leave it at that. They start talking about the woman with the envelope and trying to find her. Then, one of Rick's TV friends from the news shows up and wants to get the first press hit. But Rick doesn't want images of the dead secretary shown. He says it'd be sick for the family to see. And what's weird is how many times that the script reminds you that this Charles had a family. Like, have a heart, don't show it. And Lou, the pay-per-view host, sees this as a breaking opportunity and offers Rick $5,000 if he can be the one to report it. He even mentions this guy who got into media through the Kennedy assassination. But it's no accident that this movie brings this up. They're specifically tying this to the idea of psyop and conspiracy. Rick, corrupt as he is, lets him do it, just no cameras in their arena. Rick starts to review the knockout footage because he already noticed that Tyler wasn't really out cold. Watching it back, he realizes the punch never landed, so Tyler took the fall on purpose right before the shots. Meanwhile, the woman in the wig is trying to get the blood off of her in the bathroom. So Rick decides to go talk to this Tyler guy, who's looking nervous, but he decides to talk to Rick because he's an old high school pal. Which is weird because they wear these rings. Now I find that strange because who do you know that wears around their high school rings from like 20 years ago? He went to Neptune High and he was a sea devil. Again, these references aren't by accident. And it zooms into these rings multiple times. Anyways, Rick knows he took the fall on purpose, and he's trying to investigate why he did that right before the assassination took place to see if he knows anything. Well, Tyler admits kind of that he took the fall, meaning the fight was rigged, but he doesn't want to admit it unless they cut some kind of deal. Rick says he's not going to tell anyone, just to pay him back the money he used to bet on him. Tyler then says he didn't know that they were going to kill someone, but he won't say who. We then get a flashback, and I should mention that Tyler's handler and lawyer is this guy named Mickey, where he's talking with one of the guys taking bets. He's talking about how the fight might be rigged and Lincoln is actually going to lose this one. Mickey seems to know about it and tries to talk Tyler out of it. But yeah, Tyler owed money to the casinos, so he took this offer because they said that they would get rid of all his debts if he threw this fight. Interestingly, they didn't tell him which round, but that someone in the crowd would let him know when to throw. Meaning during this event, there was an agent pretending to be a fan in the crowd who had a tiny radio earpiece telling him when to give the cue, which was him yelling, "Here comes the pain." Then Tyler was to fall on purpose because they wanted everyone on their feet distracted. Then Tyler says, "she." Rick says, "Who's she?" Then he kind of changes the subject and says, "You hear that storm out there? I wish it would blow this town away." Now this is kind of hard to catch because it's mid-casual conversation, But there's a reason he ignored Rick when he said, "Who's she?" and he starts talking about the storm. The storm is called Hurricane Jezebel. And then Rick says, "Yeah, but who is she?" talking about the red-haired woman in the red dress. This is almost certainly a Whore of Babylon reference, as she is depicted in a red dress, and they just connected her to Jezebel. This almost certainly ties the film to esoteric references, as the Whore of Babylon is kind of a Masonic theme as well. It represents corrupted church, false authority, or an empire of lies. The idea is the truth is hidden, chaos is orchestrated, and ritual archetypes are repeated in public spectacles. So this woman with the red hair is the one who gave Tyler the directions to take the fall and rig the fight. The same woman Dunn was investigating when this first happened. Okay, this next scene is crazy. So Dunn is on the news now with Lou, talking about who this assassin is. They tell us the shooter is a Palestinian who lived in the United States for the last 6 years. He was upset about the sale of missile systems and other weaponry to Israel, and there was a handwritten note found on his body. Okay, this scene is bizarre for a bunch of reasons, but notice how Dunn is nervous here. Remember, he just said he can't lie, and he looks uncomfortable, the same way he did earlier when he was talking about lying. The movie does this on purpose to hint that this official story is actually a cover and false, that he's lying right now. Now Rick wants to talk to Dunn about what he's found, and from the start Dunn is defensive and skeptical. This is where the conspiracy starts to be revealed. It wasn't a lone shooter. There were 5 people in on it. Not what the media is pushing right now. And the movie even nails that point that anyone talking about this will look like a lunatic. The film knows. And Dunn just keeps repeating the official story, saying, "We've got this huge file on this Palestinian guy. He's a known nutcase. He was ready to die for his cause." Which is really weird if you think about the timing. This is 1998, 3 years before 9/11. They're already framing it as a suicide mission and even name-dropping Allah. So there's a lot of predictive programming vibes here. And then he explains the Israel angle to Rick, but Rick just isn't really buying the whole official story. This is when Dunn starts to tell Rick about classified info. He talks about the Norfolk test in Renville. So basically, to break this down, Dunn is talking about a classified naval missile defense test. Dunn calls it the Norfolk test, which in the movie is this air guard system, supposedly way more advanced than the Sea Sparrow missiles the Navy already had. And this is kind of like a movie trick, because it's fiction, but it's not really fiction. Sea Sparrows are real. They are the ship-based anti-missile interceptors, so the writers are anchoring this in as something that the audience might vaguely recognize. And then Dunn drops a line about the Renville incident, which the movie never explains, but it sounds like shorthand for some Gulf War style disaster, like when the USS Stark got hit in '87. Basically a moment where the missile defense failed and people died. So now the Air Guard is the miracle system that would have saved the day. And the secretary was about to shut that whole thing down, which is why the conspiracy had to kill him. Because if Congress pulled the funding, the Israel contract falls apart. Powell loses his billions, and suddenly the patsy Palestinian terrorist story makes sense. It's all a false flag cover. So Dunn telling Rick this classified stuff is really him planting the narrative. He's basically saying, look, this is too important. National security. Don't look too close. Which is exactly how defense contractors sell the public every time a weapon system fails. Reframe it as, if only we had this new system earlier. And that's predictive programming. Rick hears him, but still thinks something weird is going on. And like I said, Dunn tells him to be very careful. We can't just go out there and yell conspiracy. It's like waving a lunatic flag. Oh, and during their conversation, it shows a flashback of the redhead distracting Dunn. And this seems bizarre because it doesn't make that much sense, but we can come back to that. So Rick runs off to investigate some more. The music then changes and we see that Dunn goes through a secret door into a tunnel. We find out Dunn is actually in on it, and there are two of his accomplices waiting on him. He tells him that the cop, Rick, figured them out and that they basically messed up. No one was supposed to suspect anything. And I'm assuming this woman is the red-haired woman and that was a wig, but I'm not 100% sure. The movie doesn't make it clear. But this guy is the guy he yelled, "Here comes the pain." Dunn ends up killing those two because he knows Rick has footage that will connect them back to him. So now Rick is hunting for the dark-haired woman through the casino security footage, and at the same time, Dunn and his team are trying to locate her. Well, Rick gets to her first, and they duck off to a little stairwell, and she finally reveals the truth. She works at Powell Aircraft. She builds the ballistic reports after weapons test, and the new missile air guard system that everyone's hyping has perfect results on paper, which is a red flag because tests are never perfect. So she knows that someone faked the numbers. They want the contract and the money. So she sends an anonymous email to the secretary Kirkland. He actually replied and told her to bring proof. And so she pulls the original satellite infrared frames, and this was what was in the envelope that she tried to hand over at the fight. So we find out that the missile defense tests were staged. Nothing actually worked. It was just a fireworks show to trick Congress, push the contract through, and they were going to worry about the fallout later. Rick half believes her, but can't accept that Dunn would be in on it because Dunn's his guy, the most honorable dude in the world. But on another level, this is Rick waking up. He can't accept that the government would be in on something this big. The movie even shows Dunn planting evidence in a fake suicide note. Then we cut to Powell melting down at Dunn, where he spells out the whole plan like a checklist. The Prairie Populist secretary goes down. The disloyal employee goes down with him. The fanatic terrorist takes the rap. Airguard gets approved. Millennium gets finished. No humiliation, no scandal, no prison, just tie up loose ends. This is when it clicks for Rick that the second shot didn't miss the secretary, it missed her. She was the real target because the infrared stills would nuke the deal. So he hides her in the room, locks the door, and tells her that he'll be back, and he's kind of stuck between the loyalty to Dunn and the receipts that are sitting in his hand. Also, I should note, Powell is supposed to be Trump. I'll explain that later, but you guys can already piece together why it would be so weird for Trump to be referenced in this movie. The film doesn't say it outright, but that's clearly who he's modeled on. Rick goes back to the arena to think, and we get a flashback to when he got a call. Someone called him saying, "I'm here, sweetie, it's your lucky number," just to distract him, when he remembers seeing this blimp with an eye on it. It's called the Zero Gravity Flying Eye, and it has a camera on it. So Rick checks the footage and realizes that the woman wasn't lying about Dunn. He sees Dunn with the shooter on camera before it happens. Then, Dunn shows up behind Rick, and this is when they announce that Kirkland has died. And this part's really weird to me, because here we see on TV that Powell is clearly using the secretary's death to push political propaganda, saying that Kirkland would have approved of the air defense system, which is another shocking reference layered into the story. Now we figure out why Dunn invited Rick. He needed a local cop as an alibi, and 2, he knew that Rick was controllable and could be bought if anything went wrong. This is where Dunn tries to bribe him, saying he'll give him $1 million to look the other way. All he wants to know is where Julia is. But Rick won't tell him. He even gets beat up later by Tyler, but still refuses to give her up because he knows they'll kill her. Dunn also tries to gaslight Rick here and play victim, bringing up this Renville event that supposedly got hit by Iraqi missiles, claiming the air guard system could have saved lives. But the whole thing feels like BS because 1, it doesn't work, and 2, Dunn already proved he's willing to lie and kill, so He must know this is about money. Why would we believe a word he says? This is also kind of where they reveal the meaning behind the name of the film, Snake Eyes. The house always wins. Craps are rigged, and Snake Eyes favors the host, or in this case, the government and the corruption inside of it. But the symbolism is twofold, because when Rick wakes up, the hurricane is worse, the Powell Millennium Sphere is shattered, and Rick heads back to save Julia, but Dunn follows him. And this is where the cops show up and there's news cameras outside filming live, and Dunn gets told to put his gun down because he looks extremely suspicious, but he realizes that it's all over. But the weird part is he decides to kill himself to hide the secret. Which is weird because the movie ends with Rick becoming this hero, and then the media smears him for being corrupt and he gets indicted. So the movie kind of ends in a, well, the secret still gets buried. And we even see a reference to Powell Millennium at the end of the movie again, implying it's not over. And it ends with, well, at least he got to be on TV. And that's the end of the movie. Okay, so a politician, a defense secretary named Charles Kirkland, gets shot in the neck and is assassinated during a live boxing fight on September 10th. This happened because a boxer named Lincoln Tyler took the fall on purpose by taking directions from an agent from some type of intelligence agency. Tyler is the suspect in Kirk's real-life case. Lincoln obviously is a president who was assassinated. Not only that, but Tyler later beats up Rick in an attempt to protect these elites. In Freemasonry, a Tyler is someone who guards the door of the lodge with a drawn sword, ensuring that only initiated brethren enter. So Tyler is a Masonic guard or executioner, and in the movie, he's literally called the Atlantic City Executioner. This happens right when Rick finds out the truth. Not only that, but Gilbert Powell is Trump. Trump was supposedly a close friend to Charlie, and the film was literally shot on location at Trump's Taj Mahal in Atlantic City. So that's another tie-in. And the strangest part of all is that in the film, there is a cover-up psyop with the media involved to promote this idea of a terrorist patsy in order to promote a political agenda involving you-know-who. So yeah, I'll let you guys decide what that's all supposed to mean. Keep in mind, they mentioned the Kennedy assassination, conspiracy theories. This is Hollywood promoting this idea that the media lies, plants false evidence, uses fake assassins to carry out a political purpose, cover-ups at the highest level of government, and we're just supposed to think this is all coincidence? I mean, at some point you have to admit there's something weird going on. So again, we have timing. This is from 1998. Why are we seeing this in a film with a Trump-coded casino owner and a live assassination on September 10th? We have the Patsy media rollout pre-9/11, a Palestinian Patsy, handwritten notes that were planted to show it was a suicide mission, and a ready-made media cover story that's a weird precursor to post-9/11 script that would dominate the news 3 years later. Then there's a tech cover story featuring real military speak, including Sea Sparrow, Norfolk, so they're basing this on real stuff. And then there's the ritual and symbolism. The whole event took place in a hall. Tyler is the executioner. And then there's the whole Jezebel Whore of Babylon reference. Oh, and I did want to mention that De Palma has a whole history of weaving conspiracies and cover-ups into his films. Like, that's kind of his thing. Blowout is literally about a political assassination and the media cover story around it. A sound guy hears evidence on tape and then watches it get buried, which is basically the same as Snake Eyes. Then you've got Body Double, all about hidden cameras, surveillance, and how you can't trust what you're seeing. Same theme. Then there's The Black Dahlia, which is its own dark, deep rabbit hole. Anyways, what are your thoughts? Let me know what movie breakdown you want to see next, and all we can hope is that our minds may be unveiled.
Let go of everything you think to be true. Relax the mind and ask the question, do I truly understand what this reality is?